So what I want to do this morning, and I'm glad that you're all here, I am here along with a few of our other folks from Ewing to do a classification and compensation study with the district. And what does that mean? How does that affect you? How do you participate? That's the purpose of this orientation. It is very informal. I do not expect to wait until the end of this presentation for you to ask questions. So as we're going through the slides, if you have questions or you want to say, what does this mean for me? Feel free. Feel free to ask questions. So let me go through it and give you a little bit of an opportunity to find out a little bit about what we're doing. So just a little bit about us, our background. We started off as Ewing Consulting, based in San Clemente, California. Anybody been down really south, like past? So you know where that is. It's a great little city. It's on the way to San Diego, but it is very far away from here. So a little bit about what we've done. Our background for the past 38, close to 40 years now actually, is in working with school districts, working with school staff and working with various types of public entities. But our focus is to make sure that the employees that are working within a district or wherever they're working, that they're working within their class. What does that mean? Does anybody know what that means, within their class? Right, based on what you're required and expected to do. So we want to make sure that the job descriptions that you have, or whatever employment material that you were given, provided, that it has a very accurate depiction of what you are doing now. And if it's not, we want to go ahead and change it or revise it or make it where it's yours. So that's really the purpose, nothing too extravagant. So we have worked with a lot of different, 38 years you'd expect us to be working with a lot of district, 200 K through 12, 45 plus community colleges, 30 plus county offices of education, and then various multiple cities, counties, and so on and so forth. So, introduce you to a few of our staff. You're going to be seeing some of them, or maybe all of them. You're seeing me here, Lena Rai. I'm a HR consultant with Ewing and now CPS. We do have two other individuals that you may be seeing later on. We're expected to come back the end of this month to conduct interviews individually or in group. So in that capacity, you'll be seeing Bill Ewing Jr. there, and then Suzanne Ansari, who is our senior consultant with this firm. Of course, they're not as fun as I am. What is the purpose of doing a classification and compensation study? The classification part, which you're participating in right now, is really a component where we sit down with you and ask you, here's your current job description. Is this accurately depicting what you do? If it is, awesome. This is wonderful. If it's not, and most of the time as the various job descriptions have been written throughout the years, additional responsibilities may have been added on your plate. And as a result, we want to make sure that we're being very accurate with that job description that we're going to be writing for you now. So one, to ensure that the district employees are working in the correct classification. I've had several employees say, look, I started off as this, but now I transitioned into this, and I don't know where it's going from here. So that happens because, you know, as you participate in employment within a district, within any entity really, things happen. People leave, and their responsibilities get put onto you. That happened. And based on that, we just need to know for a lot of different reasons. But to ensure that the district has in its capacity a very accurate and legally compliant, up-to-date position or job description. This comes into a big, big thing because if somebody's looking at you and looking at your job description, they should have a really good idea of what you're doing. A really, really clear indication of here are the responsibilities, here are the main responsibilities. I did job development for a couple of years, and I would always tell the people that were seeking jobs that I was assigned to, look at the top 3 responsibilities that is listed in a job description, because that's going to be your priority. That's what they're going to expect you to do. If the top 3 job depictions or descriptions or designations are not clear, then we're going to have to talk. But the top 3, so I always look at that. That is a huge, huge part of a responsibility of a district. And then third, we want to make sure, as we get into the compensation study aspect of it, we want to make sure that there is a fair rate of pay based on comparative analysis of other school districts in the area. What are other school districts paying for the work that you are doing, and are you on par? Why would that be a big concern for a district or for any entity? Why would comparing other districts with what you're doing and the pay be a big deal?
Keeping employees.
Yes, retention. Retention, I tell people, getting a job is one thing. Keeping them in that job is a whole different thing. So you want to make sure, because it costs money to hire people, to make sure that they're trained, and then to keep them on the job. If they're going to leave for whatever reason, then it costs an employer a great deal of money. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that it's comparable, that it's clear, that it's accurate, and we have what we need. Any questions about why we're here? Oh, it's question mine. Why am I here? Okay, let me go into that thing. So the purpose of the questionnaires, and I know that majority of all of you should have had access to the online questionnaire. Well, that's that. Okay. So what is the purpose of this study? What is it not supposed to do? We are only here, I always call it, I'm a drive-by consultant. I'm here for only one purpose, and I go away. I really run. Here's what we're not here to do. We're not here to suggest to the district, here's what your staffing levels should be. Here's where you should consider, like, we don't like the L word. We do not talk, that's not our purpose. Our entire purpose is to make sure that whatever positions you're in, they're accurate. There's nothing else involved in this study. So that is a big, big fear that I always get, and people raising their hands, what does this mean? If I, do this, and does that mean no, it does not mean that. It does not mean that. Eliminating or adding positions, absolutely not. This is not what this study is about. Is it a performance review? Heck no. I will tell you that during an interview process, whether it's one-on-one or group, I will get kind of like a group therapy session where people will say, well, and then go into the whole, that's fine. What happens between us within an enclosed interview session stays with us. So you can tell me, look, this is what frustrations I have or issues that I have, but what we then communicate is based on what you and I want to communicate. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that you understand this is a safe process, that you're not going to be put in a situation where you are being told something that isn't true, or that it's going to lead to a decision that we're not in any capacity allowed or authorized to make. Does that make sense? So that's a big, big part. So this is not about work hours. You can complain to me about it. Volume of work or other staff issues, or solving other staff issues. That's not the purpose of this. It's just to find out what you do, and for me to accurately record that information and then present it to you in a written form and say, is this what you told me? And if you say no, send it back with all the crossings off and say, I told you this, or say this, and send it back to me, and I'll rewrite it. Does that make sense? So this is very much a collaborative process between you and I and the other staff members at work here. So, and with us. So why should you participate in this study? Huge part of this is that if you're participating in this orientation, that's a huge, huge move forward. We want to make sure that everybody participates in the study. I look for 100% participation rate because it tells me that there's engagement between me and the employee. If we have a process like this, but an employee says, look, I'm not going to participate in the questionnaire, I don't want to give it, then it paints a very bad picture for me, because then I have to go back to my desk and say, the only thing I have to write your new job description is what you have currently on your site. And if that's true and it's not an accurate depiction, then you failed and I failed. So I tell everyone, participate in, and go back to, you know, your other teammates and say, please participate. That's a huge part of successful compensation setting. Very low participation tells me that either you're satisfied and you have nothing to say, and then I can go back to your current job descriptions and regurgitate that and send it back to you. But if you don't like what is written or you don't think it's an accurate depiction, tell your folks, tell everyone, participate in this process. So your voice truly does matter. We do really look for your input and feedback. There is no other way for us to know what you do unless you tell us what you do. So employees who do not complete a questionnaire, for example, if you participate or somebody in your team participates but decides, look, I don't want to fill out this questionnaire, unfortunately, if that questionnaire is not received, they can't participate in the process. So they don't fill out a questionnaire, they can't come back and say, well, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. Well, you didn't tell me that it was wrong when we asked you, so you can't say it now. Why? So that's a big part of this. So participation is key. So classification study steps. You're participating in we have 2 orientations scheduled for today. One you are in and the other one at 2. And then we have I believe the completed questionnaires are to be submitted. Thelma, is this still accurate, the 17th? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we had the 16th, but the thing I emailed you back, we can do the 17th.
Okay.
Actually, it's a little more time for them.
Yeah, one more day. So the 17th is your deadline to submit it to your supervisors. Now your supervisors, as you know, are not there to cross out your questionnaire questions and say, what? No, that's not what she does or he does. That's not the purpose of a supervisor's job. The role of a supervisor in a classification study is to look at and say, in some cases say, you know what, she kind of downplayed what she does. Here's the additional aspect, or here's where this position is going. And we would like to include that or this and that or whatever the situation is. So a supervisor's comments after you complete your questionnaire is critical because it allows us to see, one, that there was talk, conversation, discussion between you and your supervisor of what you do and what you put down and what they expect. So that's a big thing. The other aspect of that communication is to make sure that you didn't miss something, that there's a huge component that you're doing but you didn't put that in for whatever reason, and that the supervisor saw that and says, look, why don't you put in that this person is excellent at presentation skills and is a great communicator. They didn't put that down, the job requires it. Go ahead and put that into the need to have and complete tasks. So that way we know, oh, she didn't put this down, but the supervisor says it's important, so we're going to put it down. And then when we give it back to you and the supervisor, you can say, oh yeah, I forgot that part. So it's always a good checking, a cross-checking between you and what the supervisor says. So that's, for them, is due on the, do we put that in? No, we did not. So the supervisor then turns that in on the 24th. So it's 7 days after you turn it in. They turn it into HR, and then HR processes that and then sends it to us. So we're scheduled to come back out on the 30th and 31st after Memorial Day, not Labor Day, Memorial Day, and we'll come here, and our format is that we will ask you, and I'll go through the process right now. How would you like the interview to take place? Would you like it one-on-one? A lot of people say, look, I'd like to just speak to you one-on-one about what I do and some of the things that I'd like to discuss with you. That's perfectly fine. You may decide, and we always encourage it, that we'd like to meet as a group. That our team does basically the same thing. We're responsible for basically the same things, and we'd like to have a group of, I've had as large as 10 people within a room. So it just depends on what you'd like to do. Group interviews are really good, but they last a long time because everybody wants to say something. But what my format is to say to you, look, here's your current job description. Tell me, in this particular job description, what are still valid tasks and responsibilities and what are not? What has been phased out, or what would you like to add to this? So we go through that, we look at what we call E&Es, which are education and experience, and I'll go into that in a little bit of detail. Education and experience, has that changed? Now is the position asking you to have 4 or 5 years of experience as to, maybe not when you first started. Whatever it is, tell us what that is, because if somebody is coming in, you get promoted and you're hiring for your position, what are you looking for? I always tell people, put yourself in this position here. If you're looking at your job description and you're hiring because there's a position open in your team, what would you be looking for? What are the tasks, responsibilities, education, experience, abilities, responsibilities? What are you looking for? Because that is a great way for you to do this questionnaire.
Lena, may I ask a question?
Yes.
On the part with between the 17th and the 24th.
Yep.
So then the employee turns it in the 17th,
Yep.
and then do they have another meeting with the employee if there needs to be an addition or
Yeah.
revision between that and the 24th?
Yeah, what we suggest is
To cover, like after we review it, to cover it.
Right, between the 17th and 24th, my suggestion is to all supervisors, speak with your staff that's turning in a questionnaire. If there's a question, I will give you a worst case scenario. I had a situation in Palm Springs once, a couple of months ago, where an employee turned in a questionnaire, submitted it to the supervisor, and the supervisor said, that's not what you're supposed to do. And so it started a conversation. Now this employee was very quiet, was very much, I'm just gonna do my work, leave me alone, don't talk to me. And this person kind of went under the radar of a lot of different things. And this is a fast-moving kind of work that we're doing. And so it happens. This allowed the supervisor and the employee to begin a conversation and a discussion. There was some unclear expectation the employee had of what their position should be, or maybe is. And the supervisor just needed to have that communication. So that is really the purpose
So
of
then you
this.
don't do like a revision or an addition without the employee?
Right, right.
Just make sure.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that is the purpose. We want to make sure that everybody's on board. An employee is the one that I focus on, but all the input that goes into it is based on the HR, it's based on the supervisor, it's based on whomever wants to participate in the process. Sometimes we have superintendents participate, sometimes we have higher level people say, look, this is where we want this position to go, or can we include that? So we'll do that. We'll include then upon review of the information, the interviews will be scheduled, whether it's individual or group. We'll then, after that, present what we consider the allocation list. What happens is, part of the interview process, one of the things that we find is that people say, look, I don't think my class title is descriptive of what I do. Other school districts use this, and we do the exact same thing. That is a part of the classification study as well. Is the class title, the title that you have, what you are called, is that accurate? Is that something that we should continue to use, or is it something that we need to then look at, revise, review, whatever the situation may be? And again, just like compensation, we go back to the other districts and say, hey, you know what? Giselle is doing all of these things, and here's what Turlock is doing. I hope there's a school district in Turlock. Here's what Turlock is doing. Making up stuff. And this is what they're called. So we come back and say, hey, we propose a new class title for you. What do you think? So in most cases, people are like, yeah, that's more descriptive. If you have an idea like, this is what it should be. I am not admin assistant 95 because it makes no sense. I don't know where that came from. Somebody called it that. It's not descriptive of what I do. I work in a school office. Whatever the situation is, let us know what that is. And then once that happens and we submit our proposed allocation titles and things like that, we send the preliminary job description. So once the interviews are done, we'll come back to our offices and write your job description based on what you told us, based on the information that we've gotten, based on the input from supervisors. and so on and so forth, and send it to you. This is important. Nothing gets codified. Nothing gets written down in stone until you say, yes, this is what I told you. Does that make sense? I do not want you to think that once you, again, this is not, that part is not the drive-by part, where we're sitting down with you and you give us information, I'm not gonna ever, not talk to you or see you again. After that preliminary job description is done, you get sent that job description. It is not in any way codified. It is written so you can review it. If you like what we say, yay, makes my life easier. If you don't like what we say, cross it out and say, that's not what I said, here's what I said. Send it back and say, rewrite this, because we will. And we'll rewrite it and send it back and say, that better? And if you say yes, then it goes to HR and say, employee has approved, here it is. Does that make sense? I don't want you to think this is your only opportunity, or you only have one opportunity to do this, because it is very much a collaborative process.
Lena, some of the revisions of the job description, like you said, if it's at a different district, is that something that your company is going to research and then present forward, or is that something we need to do on our part and then move forward?
No, heck no.
Okay, thanks.
Heck no, you are not supposed, that's my job.
Okay.
No, that's what I'm telling you, I'm gonna get to know all the school districts.
So if the employee has different types of job duties that has changed because of the site or something of that nature, then you might propose a different class title depending upon surrounding districts.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Because, as we talked about, retention is a big, so we want to make sure there's some sort of equity,
Okay.
not only within the district, but within the region.
Well, and then within the district, if they're like at different studies where, like, for instance, it's comprehensive high school and alternative ed, so sometimes that, I know, is a distinction.
Oh, yeah.
So then that was another thing, so that is also something that you guys would address, okay.
In fact, that's a really good point. One of the things that you will see is based on the school level, whether it's elementary or middle or high school.
Right,
There's gonna be
some of those levels and stuff that we have done.
And the work is different.
Right.
And so it should be accurately described in the job description. Here it is. In an elementary school, this person, a school office person, does this in an elementary, but it's really different at the high school. So we actually put that in the title.
Okay.
We say, for example, I just did one, school office assistant elementary, and then school office assistant high school. They look really different. Right. And the requirements are different. Right. So yeah, absolutely, that's a big part. And once that is done and everybody's happy, we then begin our compensation and salary survey, which we then do go out and find out. And you can't do the salary survey until we have a clear classification. Because if we're gonna survey the market, the various regional districts, whatever has been identified, we can't do this unless we have a very clear classification. So if we go out and let, for example, school office assistant, if that is now the accepted title within the district, then I have to go out to all the area regional districts and say, school office assistant. If that title is there, great. But I go into their job descriptions and say, what is it that's comparable and what are they paying for the same work that you're doing? That's how we do a salary survey. Takes a little bit of time, but it actually gives us a really good indication of what is happening in what we call the market in terms of compensation. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And then we present the final report once everything has been completed. It's a classification and compensation. So a couple of things as you are filling out the questionnaire. Do make sure that you do download the online form of the questionnaire so it'll save you a lot of time. We used to actually do it paper, not too long ago actually, paper and pencil, where we would hand you a questionnaire and then you would hand that to the supervisor and then they would hand that to so what we decided to do was make it online, and that way you can submit it electronically, they can submit it electronically to us, and then we scan it into our systems so we'll always have a record of your questionnaire. Do make sure that you add as much detail as possible. Here's the other thing that I would ask you to do. My background is working in the school district, so I have a pretty good idea of a lot of the programs and a lot of different services that are offered. However, not everybody on our staff is. So if you're going to put in like, various types of programs or financial acronyms, please just tell us what that means. Because once a job description is written, we can't put acronyms in there. Here's the other thing. If you're going to put in a program that's just temporary, or funding is temporary for it, we usually try not to do that because it may not be there next year, or it may not be, part of the final thing. So we're going to put in a generic language as much as possible, so you will see that. You say, I told you all this stuff and I gave you 17,000 acronyms, why didn't you put it in? Well, here's why, because it may change next year. So in some cases we do have to put it in. In some cases, the program is consistent, it's constantly funded, it's going to be there to the end of time, that's fine. But if it's not, just know that we're going to put in generic language. It's going to say student service programs funded, quarterly, whatever the situation may be. So don't be too worried about that. That's part of the process. Do make sure that you look at your current job description. How many of you have your current job description near and dear to you? Great. If you have not, take a look at your current job description. A lot of times people have been working for a district for many years and they never have, the need to go back to their current job descriptions and take a look. Some people have called me crying, I did not know I was supposed to do this. Take a look at what you have and make sure that you're looking at it, because that's going to help you and us. If you're going through that current job description and saying, we have 12 different tasks and responsibilities that are listed or essential duties, I do 6 of these. These other 6 to 7, I've never done them, or we don't do that anymore. That's great. That's always a good thing to bring. So make sure if you are participating in a group, you could do these questionnaires together. So if you are all, for example, within a certain class title, instructional assistants, if you're all within a class title, bring everyone together. I know that's difficult. For Starbucks. Bring everyone together and say, let's do this together, and then just submit one questionnaire. So you don't individually have to submit questionnaires if that's just crazy. Do this during working hours. I will tell you that this is a very lengthy process. The questionnaire asks a lot of questions where you're going to be racking your head and saying, so do this during work hours because it is detailed and it is lengthy, and you may not want to do it all in one sitting unless you have vodka. I don't know. But my suggestion is you don't do that. You don't
Not
do
during
that.
lunch hours.
No, I'll bring it with you into the interview.
I know, right?
You don't want to do it.
Isn't that
Do it
the
as
orange
much as
chips this
possible during
morning?
work hours, and you may want to do it and keep right next to you a copy of your current job description, because that will help as you're writing this. And I'll go through the section so you're aware of that. And here's the big thing: do talk to one of us. We will come and talk to you if you're the only one in that class. If you're the only representative within a certain classification, we're going to talk to you regardless whether you want to talk to us or not. But we suggest that you talk to us because we just want to verify the information that's on a questionnaire written down with what you want us to say. So that's a big deal. I always tell people, ask. There is a section on there that says, do you want to interview with a consultant? I say yes. So again, just more helpful tips. Do not complete, I already said that. Do not complete in one sitting. It's, I would say, next to impossible in some cases to complete it all in one sitting unless you have like 4 or 5 hours to kill at work. Do not be afraid to turn it into the supervisor. Get this a lot. What happens if I say something and the supervisor says, and crosses it out and says, what? No. That's where the conversation begins. If there are unclear expectations, you don't want them codified in a job description. You don't want, somebody to say this is happening and for no one to look at it, no one to have that conversation, and it gets put into a job description, and then you hire for that position, they're like, why do I have to, sit here for 17 hours and count pencils? It says that in my job description. Where did that come from? I don't know. That's what the employee said. We have had that tell me it's just the worst possible thing. So we look for a lot of different people to come in and participate in this process. So talk to your supervisors, ask them, or have your supervisors tell you, and if you, how many of you are supervisors here? There you go. For those supervisors that are represented here, speak to your employees and let them know this is a process where we just want to have some clarity on what you do. That's it. That's the entire purpose of this process. Any questions about that? You know, I love this. This is my word. I put it in here. I teach public policy. So transparency in government and in all things public sector is huge because public trust. You know, so transparency is a big, big part of this. We want to make sure there's open communication and there's open lines of dialogue. That's the whole purpose of this. Is not going to happen in a back alley somewhere. This is where everybody, I'm not telling TVs. Back there. Everybody needs to be aware this is what is being written about you. You have full participation in it. Here's what the supervisor has commented on. Let's go. That's the whole purpose of this process. Let's go into the questionnaire, the dreaded questionnaire. Again, you know, as you have seen online, doesn't get any better. The questionnaire is long. We tried to make it kind of compact, but then we missed information. Then we were getting people saying, I didn't tell you that. Oh, what about this? So we decided, no, we're going to keep it the way it is, and here it is. So you're going to see on your online questionnaire a section called background information. We do look at this, not only because we need to know your name, but we look at your current class title. So make sure that you do put your current class title on there, if you need to refer to your current job description. It'll also ask you, if you look down, it says, if this is a group interview, please include the names. This is important because we want to give everyone credit for completing the job questionnaire. So for example, if you have 4 or 5 people participating in a group, make sure everybody's name is on there. If it's not, then it comes back to that situation, then you didn't participate in this process and you can't talk to me now. So we don't want to do that. Make sure everybody gets credit for being a part of that. Department, location, or special name. I'm not going to go through every single one, so you won't be here till next Tuesday. Department, location, name, that is important for us. We do look at that because, for example, if you're in educational services, or if you're in fiscal, or you're in public works, we want that information because we put that as a designation. Reports to this department. So that's a big component.
So for our services, it would either be district office or site-based?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And if it's a school, yeah, absolutely put school or elementary, because it'll give us a really good idea. Here's the other question that I often get, and actually it's a big part of what we do. If you're moving around from school to school to school, or if you're moving from elementary to middle to, that's a big part too, because it'll tell us that we can't pigeonhole you. For example, I can't put in the class title, Giselle, I don't know why I'm picking on Giselle, I don't know who Giselle is. Giselle Jones dash, administrative assistant dash elementary. Because Giselle may be moving from middle school to high school to elementary on a frequent basis. So I can't pigeon, so let me know if you are moving, you're part of the district, you're part of a school site, whatever the situation is, that gives us a really good idea of what work we need to include. Here's the other one that I want you to pay attention to. Name, right in the middle of the job questionnaire, name and title of the person who signs your evaluation. That is the person you report to. That is the person who has supervisory authority over you. Huge! Because the very first thing you're going to see on job description, it says, under the direction of. Most people leave that blank. I don't know who you're reporting to. They have to go back to the organizational charts. I have to call HR. That's never, not that HR isn't fun, but I then have to do a lot of research. So tell me who you're reporting to and all of those things. So let me skip over a big part. You'll notice at the very bottom, this didn't do a really good job of, before I do that, it says, do you wish an interview with a consultant? Yes! Yes, please, yes. That's a big part because as I said, once you complete this and the information is there, all I have, if you say no to the interview, then all I have is your questionnaire. So all you're going to get is what you wrote in the questionnaire. And if there are things in your questionnaire that you'd like to explain, but you don't request an interview, I don't have access to you now. So always say yes, because it'll help us, and I'll have your questionnaire in front of me and say, you said this, is that right? So you say yes, no, or, I was with a group, and I had to put it to peer pressure. I had to put it down, but that's not really what I think. Let me tell you what I really think. Okay? That's awesome. So whatever it is, let us know, so yes. And then here's a big one. Please summarize your major purpose of your job. We do look at this, because I do include that in the description. And then here's the big part of page 1 of the questionnaire, which says specific duties and responsibilities. You are given, and online I think it's unlimited, but here you're given about 4 or 5 spaces to tell us what your priorities are. And we ask you, how often do you perform it, and what's the percentage of your time? If you're telling me 90% of your time on a daily basis is spent on reports of a fiscal nature, that you're submitting reports for local, state, and federal authorities, and you're doing that 90% of your time, that's going to give me a really good indication of what your job is all about. If you tell me that 60% of your work is looking at attendance records, or looking at various things and making sure that that's valid and verified and all of those things, that'll give me a good indication of 2 things. 1, your title, but 2, it'll also tell me what, again, your priorities are. So we pay a huge, that's where my eyes go, right here. That is, do you want to talk to me? And then this, what are your priorities? So put your priorities first. That's a huge part, because that's what I'm going to put big and bold on your job description. Here's what they do. So here's page 2. Page 2 of this is if you are responsible, are you having to deal with outside organizations? For example, a lot of fiscal staff have to deal with local entities or state and federal, whatever the situation is. What are those outside organizations? Number 5, records and reports. Are you in charge of various records and reports? Huge responsibility. If you are accountable for developing, writing, then submitting these reports, that's a huge component. Make sure you put that down, because it adds a layer to your responsibilities. Are you then involved in any type of fiscal decision making? I have had people say, yes, I am the school administrative assistant. I don't know why I'm picking on them. And I have a budget of $120,000. And I've had people say this, I authorize checks and I do this. You do not. You do not have that authority. You recommend purchases. You tell the principal, you tell whomever, the administrators of the school, this is what needs to happen, but you don't sign off on that. So I look at that very carefully. I look at the job description, and I look at what that responsibility is, and then what you're telling me is fiscal. Now the head of fiscal, the director of financial services, or accountant may have that responsibility. So take a look at it. Monitoring is different than developing, recommending purchases, and authorizing expenditures. If somebody says they're authorizing expenditures and somebody's an admin assistant, I'm going to call them and say, tell me about this. Because that's not really in your job description. Where's that coming from? So, this is how detailed we kind of look at it. If you are supervising staff, make sure you tell me that. There's a big difference between providing work direction and actually evaluating and supervising staff. If you're signing off on employee performance evaluations, conducting them, that is a supervisor. Somebody who says, hey, move box A to box B, that is not a supervisor. So again, that is a big component of the work that we look at, is what is it that you're doing? Are you recommending personnel actions? Is it direct supervision or is it indirect? Leading and providing work direction, and so on and so forth. Any questions before I don't want to take up?
We need to, on the subordinate section?
Yeah.
List employees, did you want just like if they're teachers and then the number of teachers, and then classified staff and the number of classified staff?
Yeah.
Is that how you want that written? Because it lists employees, but it's not actually people's names, it's classifications, is that correct?
Yeah. So, right. So for this section here,
It's on the very bottom.
yeah, right down here, you can actually, yeah, you don't have, right, you don't have to put their names. It's just class titles. For example, if you're supervising 17 school admin assistants, then just say 17 school admin assistants.
Thank you.
Right, absolutely. Because the names could change.
Right.
Okay. This very quickly, I'll tell you. You'll notice at the middle here, it says, what's your educational experience? Huge part of where we focus our eyes. Now, it's not you. I tell people, don't make this about you. This is not a you description, it's a position description. What does the position require in terms of education? If it's high school and maybe supplemented by certain college courses, write that in. If the position requires a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, put that in. So it's not about, you may be sitting here with a PhD or with a master's degree, but does that directly correlate with the position that you're in? A lot of people, are working not so much based on their education, but based on what position they're supposed to be in or responsible for. So don't do it based on what you have, do it based on what the position requires. And then again, with the experience, again, don't do it based on what you have, but what the position requires. If you have 15 years with the district, that's great. But does that requirement then figure into what the position is all about? If they only require 2 or 3 years of experience to get in, put that in. Does that make sense? So I say personalize it a little bit, but don't, in this section, make it just about what you are bringing in for this position. And then, are there any licensing, certifications, permits that are required? One of the biggest questions I have is within this district, there's going to be the standard language of everybody from district to school site, they must have first aid, CPR, TB clearance. If that is what is required for every single person, then every single job description is going to have that language. If in addition to that, let's say, you must have a Class B driver's license, then put that in there and we'll go ahead and include that. Does that make sense?
So only the above and beyond?
No.
Like not that, so the first aid is you're already done.
No, I would put it in. Even if it's, standard across, I would put it in and say, we're required to have this, but here's, in addition to that, here's what we do. Just so we got it, so we're clear, because we're, outside the district. So, absolutely. And then working conditions. Not as critical, but if you'd like to say, look, I get constantly spit on by people, put that in. Aggressive and not so nice people that I have to deal with on a constant basis. I get school admin telling me all the time that are at the front desk, loud, aggressive parents and students, belligerents, whatever the situation is. Go ahead and put it down, because I always tell people, look, we don't want to set somebody up who's just starting in this position without a clear understanding of what they're going to be encountering. Because, getting a job, again, is one thing. Keeping a job, whole different thing. And here's where you keep the job. If you give a really good indication of here's what you're going to be seeing, they're going to be that much more prepared as they start. Does that make sense? Okay. And then physical, yeah. If you're, by the way, for the physical aspect, if you're lifting over a certain amount, we need to put that in there. That you're going to be lifting up to 50 pounds or whatever the situation is. And then, so physical agility and hazards. If you're working for public works, so maintenance and ops, this is a big deal. Are you working around chemicals? Are you working around various machine parts and so on and so forth? And bloody and bodily fluids, that's a big deal also. If you're dealing with little kids who are coming in to see the nurse, or the nurse is not there, but you're covering for the nurse, whatever the situation is, you may want to put that down and so on and so forth. So consultants will, based upon completion of that, will review the form, and once we set you down for an interview, it's going to take about 30 minutes, a half an hour or so, and we'll go back and forth about, this is what you wrote, is this what you mean? Tell us a little bit more, and so forth. The interview process is actually my favorite thing in the world, because I get to know people. Again, if you're the only person in that class, we will, I feel like the mafia, we will talk. There will be discussion. I know where you live.
We'll be ready.
Bring vodka. You can request an individual or group interview. Group interviews are great if you're all working within the same class. I don't interview instructional assistants with admin assistants. So if you're within the class and you'd like to speak together, feel free. Group interviews are highly encouraged. Or you can request an individual one. If beyond this interview, we still have questions, I have been known to call people and say, look, tell me a little bit more about this. I didn't quite get this. Tell me a little bit more and give me a little bit more detail. So that might also happen. We just want to get it right. We want you to be happy. We want you not to send us back a nasty letter saying, what? This is not what I said. So we don't want that. We avoid that. So as much as possible, before we send you a preliminary job description, we're going to constantly ask you, is this it? Is this it? Is this it? And if you say, yes, stop bothering me, then we're good. Then we're absolutely not going to bother you after that. So I know this is a lot of reading. I'm just going to paraphrase for you a lot of the stuff. Once the classification study is done, we then have a really solid understanding of what the positions are and what the responsibilities are. Now we can go out into the market, into whatever the school districts that we'd like to talk to based on what the district says is okay, and we look at their job descriptions. We look at their compensation and salary schedules, and we say, here is what the other districts are paying for those positions. We usually look between 8 to 15 comparable districts. If you only do a couple, if you only do 3, it's not going to give you a really good picture. But if you go out and do a wide search, you have a really good idea of what's going out in the market or going on. Then we look at benchmark classifications, specific positions that we consider benchmarks, and then we use that information to propose that this is what is happening. And that usually takes about 1 to 2 months. It depends on whether the other districts are willing to cooperate with us. And if they are, then we're good. In other cases, I have to be subvert, do espionage, and go through other, different ways to get that information. But we always have to get it in order to provide Farmersville a really good idea of what's going on in their market. Does that make sense? So the compensation will always take place after the compensation. I'm done. My comedy routine is over now. Feel free if you have any questions. I will give you some dates up on the board in just a second, but I know I went through some of the information really, really quickly. You do have your questionnaire, whether you printed it out or it's still online in front of you. If you have any questions, I will leave my contact information with Thelma. So bombard her with all my information. Feel free to call me, contact me anytime. I would be happy to go through it with you one-on-one as you're completing it. Or you come as a group and you say, look, we're not sure about this, call me. I'll be happy to go through that with you. My suggestion is, as much as possible, give me as much detail about what you do as possible, because that will really help us in writing your job description and getting it right the first time. Okay, so let me give you the last part of this. Here are again the dates, if you'd like to jot them down somewhere. Your questionnaires are due to the supervisors on the 17th of May. Oh, can we change that to 23rd? So we're making that the 24th now, right?
It's fine, yeah, whenever they want to do it. 23rd, 24th is fine.
23rd, 24th is fine. We're flexible. We're flexible. So make sure that you do submit that. That is the next step. And then they do have a deadline as well to turn it in to HR. And when HR then processes it, they will let us know, and then we set up the staff interviews, and we come out to meet with you in May. No questions? All right, I thank you for participating in this process. Go home and tell everyone about what we're doing, and have them participate as well. As much as, especially if you're supervisors, as much as you can rile everyone up and say, please complete this, it'll help the process, and it'll really make this a very easy process for us as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Everyone.